We're counting down the 20 foods Canadian families relied on to survive the brutal winters of the 1970s. From morale-boosting treats at outdoor rinks to the most shelf-stable protein powerhouses. Each item on this list earned its spot by helping families stay fed, warm, and together, when fresh produce vanished and cold lingered for months. Which comfort foods were pure nostalgia and which were true lifelines? Let's find out, starting with number 20. Nothing cut through the chill of a Canadian winter outing like a fresh, hot beaver tail. First sold at the Jell-O Kraft and Community Fair in 1978, this hand-stretched piece of dough, fried to order and dusted with cinnamon sugar, became an instant classic. The original recipe came from Grant and Pam Hooker, who shaped the pastry to resemble a beaver's tail, and by the winter of 1980, skaters on Ottawa's Rideau Canal lined up at the first kiosk for the treat. Each beaver tail delivered a blast of warmth and about 600 calories, best eaten outside, steam rising into the icy air as sticky fingers fumbled with mittens. Unlike the foods that filled pantries and freezers, beaver tails had zero shelf life. They were a celebration, not a staple, an excuse to gather, laugh, and thaw out together, if only for a few sweet minutes. Inside a 1970s Canadian school, nothing felt as reassuring on a freezing day as the smell of grilled cheese drifting from the cafeteria. The sandwich arrived golden, edges crisp from the griddle, with processed cheddar melting between slices of white bread. Served with a cup of tomato soup or a carton of milk, it was more than just a meal. It was a midday thaw for kids who'd spent recess outside, faces red from the wind, mittens drying on the radiator. Grilled cheese had no shelf life, no place in the pantry. It was made to order and eaten on the spot, a brief comfort before heading back out into the cold. School boards across Canada made this simple sandwich a hot lunch staple, using nutrition grants and bulk ingredients to stretch tight budgets. For many children, it was the taste of care and community, a reminder that someone was looking out for them, even in the depths of winter. Jell-O boxes and snack pack pudding cups brightened up even the dreariest winter pantry. In the 1970s, these instant dessert mixes promised a little sparkle at the end of a plain meal. No fresh fruit required, just a kettle and a fridge. Jell-O's bright colors and wobbly texture made it a fixture at birthday parties and after-school snacks, while pudding cups with their metallic pull tabs felt like a luxury in a lunchbox. Supermarkets stacked shelves with lime, orange, and raspberry, each box costing less than 20 cents and lasting more than a year unopened. These treats delivered a morale boost on long gray days, even if nutrition was in short supply. For many families, the promise of something sweet and easy was enough, a small reward for making it through another cold Canadian afternoon. Cracking open a frozen orange juice concentrate tube was a winter ritual in countless Canadian kitchens. With fresh citrus almost impossible to find and expensive when it did appear, families turned to Bird's Eye or Minute Maid, metal tubes stacked in the freezer, ready to be thawed and mixed at a moment's notice. The icy cylinder slid out with a satisfying clunk, syrupy and sharp, promising a burst of vitamin C when colds and flu were always lurking. Ads from the 1970s promised a health boost and convenience, and a single tube, costing around 50 cents, could make a full pitcher of juice. Kids fought over who got to stir, watching the concentrate dissolve as cold water was added. For months, the freezer kept these tubes safe, a small insurance policy against the gray monotony of winter, and a reminder that a taste of sunshine could come from a can. No matter where you lived in Canada during the 1970s, a loaf of bread and a tub of margarine were likely sitting on your kitchen counter, ready to fill bellies on the cheap. Bread cost about 30 cents a loaf, and margarine routinely undercut butter, sometimes by half, making it the go-to spread for families watching every dollar. In Quebec, margarine was legally required to stay white until 1976, a holdover from dairy lobby battles that made yellow margarine a rare sight in the province. Slices of Weston's or Dempster's bread, thick with imperial or parquet, turned up at every meal, breakfast, lunch, or next to a bowl of canned soup. The taste was plain and the texture familiar, but nothing filled out a meal faster or cheaper. Bread went stale fast in a cold house, so families bought often and used every crumb, a reminder that survival sometimes meant settling for simple comfort. A pot of beef and root vegetable stew simmered on countless Canadian stovetops through the darkest months of the 1970s. Chunks of stewing beef, often the cheapest cut the butcher had, went into the pot with carrots, potatoes, and turnips hauled up from the root cellar, their skins still dusted with earth. These vegetables lasted 4 to 6 months in cool storage, making them a reliable backbone for winter meals. The stew cooked low and slow, filling the house with a deep, savory aroma that seeped into mittens and sweaters left to dry by the stove. Every spoonful delivered warmth and calories, stretching $1 further than any roast. For many families, this was the taste of survival, a meal that heated both the kitchen and the people in it, proof that with a little planning and patience, winter could be endured, one steaming bowl at a time. A tinfoil-wrapped meatloaf was a Sunday classic in 1970s Canadian kitchens, built for both comfort and economy. Families leaned on ground beef, sometimes pork or a mix, stretched out with oats or breadcrumbs to make every slice count. The loaf would bake in a battered metal pan, sealed under foil, filling the house with a deep, savory aroma that clung to hallway coats. When the foil cracked open at the table, steam billowed out, and everyone knew there'd be enough for tomorrow's sandwiches too. Meatloaf could keep 3 or 4 days in the fridge, reheated for quick weeknight meals, or served cold with mustard. Church recipe swaps traded secrets for getting the most out of a pound of beef, especially as prices crept up through the decade. For many, meatloaf meant plenty, a ritual of togetherness, and a practical way to stretch $1 through the coldest stretch of winter. Tourtière meant winter insurance for families in Quebec. Every January, kitchens filled with the scent of ground pork and beef, spiced with cloves and cinnamon, as parents and grandparents rolled out pastry and assembled dozens of pies. The oven stayed hot for hours, each golden round cooling on racks before being wrapped and stacked in freezers, or set outside on the porch, where the cold did the rest. A tourtière made in January could last until March, ready at a moment's notice for a Sunday supper, or when guests braved the snowdrifts. The first slice always broke through a flaky crust, releasing a wave of warmth and spice that cut through even the deepest cold. Today, tourtière is mostly a holiday dish, but in the 1970s, it was a symbol of readiness and care, a taste of home, preserved against the long winter ahead. A can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup could turn almost anything into a casserole, and in the 1970s, that was its superpower. Canadian families kept stacks of those red and white cans, priced at about 30 cents each, lined up in the pantry, ready for a weeknight shortcut. With a twist of the opener and a quick pour, condensed soup became the glue that held together noodles, leftover chicken, frozen peas, or whatever else needed using up. Recipe pamphlets from Campbell's promised one-dish magic. Just add soup, bake, and let the oven do the work while the house warmed up. The result was always the same: creamy, salty, bubbling comfort, reheated just as easily the next day. Cream soup casseroles were the backbone of can-to-pan cooking, a ritual of thrift and convenience that bridged the gap between home-cooked meals and the freezer aisle. A frozen pot pie dinner in the 1970s felt like a small miracle on a school night. Swanson-style foil trays came stacked in the chest freezer, each compartment holding its promise: golden pastry on top, bubbling gravy, and chunks of meat and carrot below. and a scoop of mashed potatoes or peas tucked beside. These meals could last half a year in the deep freeze, ready to go from box to oven without a second thought. At around 80 to 95 cents per meal, they offered busy parents a break from prep and cleanup. Just heat, serve, and toss the tray. As more families bought home freezers, frozen dinners became a symbol of modern convenience, their steamy aroma filling the kitchen while the wind howled outside. No dishes, no fuss, just a hot meal and a taste of the future. One divided tray at a time. Kraft dinner, better known as KD, was the blue box that never left the pantry shelf in a 1970s Canadian home. For as little as 20 cents a box, you could fill a pot with elbow macaroni, stir in that neon orange cheese powder, and have a steaming bowl ready in under 15 minutes. Kids learned to slice up hot dogs, just regular wieners cut into coins, and toss them in for extra protein and a bit of sizzle. The result was creamy, salty, and just a little bit rubbery, but it was cheap, filling, and lasted a full year in the cupboard. Kraft's ads promised quick cheese, please, and every box delivered on that claim. KD didn't pretend to be healthy, but it stretched $1 and kept bellies full, making it the unsung hero of winter lunches and after-school snacks across the country. A bag of frozen mixed vegetables was a quiet hero in the 1970s Canadian freezer. Green Giant's Ho 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 jingle echoed from TV sets, promising peas, carrots, and corn that tasted almost like summer, even in January. Freezer technology had finally reached most homes by the middle of the decade, and these frosty blends could last 8 months or more, ready to steam in just 5 minutes. For families staring down another week of meat, potatoes, and bread, a scoop of bright, slightly soggy veg rounded out the plate and added a rare hit of vitamins when fresh produce was out of reach. Kids might grumble, but every serving was a small act of winter survival, proof that a freezer could deliver more than just ice and leftovers. Today, the endless variety of frozen vegetables makes those old pea-carrot-corn blends feel almost quaint. But in the 1970s, they were a taste of balance in a carb-heavy season. Tuna noodle casserole was a masterclass in pantry resourcefulness. In the 1970s, a can of cloverleaf or gold seal tuna, costing about 40 cents, could sit on the shelf for 2 or 3 years, waiting for the next cold snap. Families mixed the tuna with egg noodles and a can of condensed soup, usually cream of mushroom, then topped it with a layer of breadcrumbs or crushed crackers. The casserole baked in half an hour, filling the kitchen with the scent of bubbling sauce and toasted crumbs. This dish delivered real protein at a time when fresh meat was expensive and winter paychecks had to stretch. Every family had their own twist, but the essentials stayed the same: cheap, filling, and shelf-stable. Today, tuna casserole has faded from most dinner tables, but the memory of that golden crust and the sound of the can opener still lingers for many Canadians. Split pea soup simmered on countless Canadian stovetops through the darkest weeks of winter. Dried yellow peas, bought in bulk and tucked away in the pantry for a year or more, were poured into a heavy pot with the leftover ham bone from Sunday dinner. The bone knocked against the sides as the soup cooked low and slow, sending up clouds of steam that fogged the kitchen windows. Carrots and onions stretched the pot further, and the scent of simmering broth seeped into mittens drying by the stove. This soup was more than a meal. It was a way to make every scrap count, turning pantry pulses and kitchen leftovers into days of hearty lunches. In Quebec, habitant pea soup became a brand name, but homemade versions ruled most kitchens, especially when budgets were tight and the cold seemed endless. Today, Few families let soup bubble all day, but the memory of that ham bone and the warmth it brought lingers long after the last bowl is scraped clean. On the Canadian prairies, the arrival of November meant it was time for a perigee bee. In church basements and farmhouse kitchens, neighbors gathered around long tables, flour dusting their sleeves, to make hundreds, sometimes thousands, of Ukrainian perogies in a single day. The filling was simple: mashed potato, cottage cheese, a hint of onion. Each dumpling was pinched shut, lined up on baking sheets, and flash frozen in the cold air, ready to last 6 months in the deep freeze. Oral histories from Manitoba and Saskatchewan recall these bees as a lifeline, a way for immigrant families to pool labor and ensure nobody faced winter short on food. The perogies themselves were calorie-dense and cheap, boiled or fried, and served with onions, sour cream, or whatever could be spared. Today, store-bought perogies are easy to find, but the memory of those communal workdays, the laughter, the endless dough, the promise of plenty, still lingers in prairie kitchens. A pot of hot cereal on the stove was the promise of energy before facing a winter day in 1970s Canada. Oats and Red River mix, sold in bulk sacks that could last a year, were breakfast's foundation, scooped into boiling water as frost crept up the kitchen window. 5 minutes of cooking filled the house with a nutty, earthy aroma, and by the time the bowls landed on the table, steam curled into the cold air. Quaker's ads called it "stick to your ribs," and for good reason. A serving could keep a kid warm through a snowball fight or a long walk to school. Every spoonful was thick, hearty, and just sweet enough with a splash of milk or brown sugar. This wasn't just breakfast, it was fuel, a daily ritual that made the rest of winter's foods possible. In northern Canada, survival in winter meant knowing how to stretch supplies for months. Bannock, simple fry bread made from flour, baking powder, lard, and water, was a daily anchor on tables from small towns to remote communities. Flour arrived in 50-pound sacks, hauled in by sled or truck before the snow closed the roads. Elders recall the effort. Days spent bringing in enough to last until spring. Bannock cooked over a wood stove, its heavy scent mixing with wood smoke, promised warmth and energy after hours outside. Alongside, strips of dry meat, moose, caribou, or rabbit, hung from racks, smoked and salted to last the whole season. This dry meat could keep for months, sliced thin and eaten on the go or simmered into stews. Together, bannock and preserved meat were more than food. They were a testament to ingenuity and resilience, shaped by necessity and passed down through generations. In Atlantic Canada, salt cod was more than a meal. It was a lifeline through winter's leanest months. Dried on wooden racks along the coast and packed away in barrels, salt cod could keep for years without spoiling, ready to be revived long after the last fishing boat docked for the season. Families soaked the stiff fillets overnight, then flaked the fish into chowders thick with potatoes, onions, and a splash of evaporated milk. On Fridays or during community gatherings, salt cod was mashed with leftover potatoes and fried into golden fish cakes, crisp at the edges and briny at the center. For many, the taste of salt and sea mingled with the heavy scent of bread soaking up chowder broth was the flavor of survival. While today's kitchens favor fresh fillets, the memory of salt cod's staying power and its role in getting families through the harshest Atlantic winters still lingers in maritime pride. A tin of canned salmon was a pantry powerhouse in 1970s Canada, especially when winter dragged on and fresh options disappeared. Cloverleaf and gold seal packed the shelves, with each can promising up to 5 years of shelf life, an insurance policy against empty stores and snowed-in weekends. Salmon loaf was the go-to, a simple mix of tinned fish, breadcrumbs, and egg, baked until firm and served hot for Friday supper. Leftovers landed in lunchboxes the next day, cold and dense, with a whiff of the Pacific lingering in the kitchen air. On the West Coast, canneries kept families supplied. But by the mid-70s, even prairie and Atlantic homes relied on canned salmon for affordable, reliable protein. A single loaf could feed 6, stretching a dollar further than most meats. Today, with fresh fish flown in year-round, the humble salmon loaf feels like a relic. But in the 1970s, it was a national staple, proof that survival sometimes came in a green and yellow tin. A rectangular can of maple leaf luncheon meat sat at the back of nearly every 1970s Canadian pantry, waiting for the day when fresh options ran out. Priced around 90 cents for a 340-gram tin, it promised protein and peace of mind with a shelf life that stretched well past 2 winters. The trilingual label, English, French, and sometimes Inuktitut, hinted at its reach from city apartments to northern outposts. Sliced and fried in a skillet, it filled the kitchen with the smell of sizzling pork, often landing between 2 pieces of bread or alongside potatoes for supper. Pulling the tab and hearing the pop meant you were set for another meal, no matter how hard the snow fell outside. Maple Leaf's luncheon meat earned its place at the top. Reliable, filling, and proudly Canadian, it was the ultimate winter insurance. From the fleeting warmth of a fresh beaver tail at number 20 to the ultimate shelf-stable power of Maple Leaf luncheon, meat at number 1, this countdown has revealed the ingenious ways Canadian families faced 1970s winters. Patterns emerge. Survival foods needed to last, whether it was canned salmon loaf with a 5-year shelf life or salt cod chowder that could keep for years in the pantry. Across all 20 entries, the common thread was resilience, stretching every dollar, every calorie, and every tradition to endure months of cold and scarcity. The most surprising entries, like Ukrainian perogies made by the hundreds or indigenous Bannock paired with preserved meats, remind us that survival was also rooted in community and cultural adaptation. Ranking was based on storability, caloric value, and winter practicality, qualities that shaped not just diets, but the rhythms of family life. Altogether, these foods tell us winter survival in 1970s Canada was about more than nutrition. It was about ingenuity, togetherness, and the unique bond between food and the Canadian winter.